Transgender healthcare in the Philippines is gradually evolving. Historically, many trans Filipinos navigated their transition through self directed care, informal networks, or by traveling abroad. Today, there is a growing presence of community led clinics providing formal, monitored medical support locally. Recently, this development gained renewed public attention when international drag performer Marina Summers publicly discussed her medical transition. Her announcement has prompted broader discussions about the realities of accessing gender affirming care in the country. To help us examine the current medical landscape, we are joined by Doctor Deano Reyes of Hara Clinic, the physician who oversaw Marina's medical transition. Dr. Dino is the medical director of Hara Clinic, a holistic gender and sexual health clinic in the Philippines. His work on LGBTQ plus health has a strong focus on transgender care through gender affirming hormone therapy or GAHT. Welcome, Dr. Dino. Thank you for saying yes to this interview.
Hi, everybody. So, good morning or good afternoon whenever you're watching this. Nice to be here.
So, first question: when you handled Marina's transition, I assume her schedule was really packed. She was really busy. How was it trying to help her transition as a woman? And from a medical perspective, how do you manage and monitor yung changes and stress of each RT for a high performance artist like Marina Summers?
Yeah. So, actually, Marina was a little bit of, we needed to jump through a few extra hoops with her because I actually handle Marina as like a general patient even before we started transitioning. I handle a lot of the drag race queens, actually, the Filipino queens. I've become some of a sort of a go-to doctor for them. So whenever they have like basic concerns, like fevers or like upset stomachs or stuff, I'm the on-call doctor. So I've had a good relationship with them already. Marina, for her transitioning, came to me about approximately a year ago. And the thing that made it tricky is because she was actually gonna stay for like a residency, I think in Vegas, yung the drag show residency. So for a big chunk of her transitioning, she was actually out of the country. So how do we do that? It's actually not that difficult, no? For all transgender individuals, basic lang naman. We start with our initial labs. So check their testosterone, we check their estradiol. So we know yung starting point of the hormone. So we know what the doses need to be, how aggressive, how conservative. And then the hormones are just one aspect. Much more important is yung safety profile. So we have to check their CBC, we have to check their liver, their kidney. So all of those things are the monitoring aspect. And madali lang siya. For me, I like to do it every 3 months. And
Okay.
with Marina, after her initial labs, we discussed her goals, like how quickly she wanted to transition. Since we were keeping it secret during that time, we wanted to ask, like, do you really want to go full feminine as quick as possible, or do you want this to be a more like smooth, subtle transition? So all of those things I take into account so that I can give my patient an appropriate dose. And contrary to popular belief, transitioning or gender affirming care is super personalized medicine. It's not a decahon
Mm-hmm.
approach. So a lot of my trans individuals have very vastly different dosing and it adjusts. Like you're dosing at the start, we usually touch point after 1 month and I ask my patients, I ask Marina, are you happy with your current rate of
Mm-hmm.
transition of changes? Is this too fast? Is this too slow? So it's a lot of communication and the good thing about it is it's easy to do it now in the modern world in term with the
Mm-hmm.
capacity online teleconsultations and stuff like that. So even though if she was abroad, it was easy for us to be able to coordinate. And then she would just
Mm-hmm.
get her labs done. She would send me the result. And then from
Mm-hmm.
there, we would just adjust, go up and down the dosing.
Mm-hmm.
And if there were side effects, we would just also adjust to that if there were other concerns. So it wasn't that difficult. And I'm very happy that it's like that because we do have a lot of patients. I do have a lot of patients who aren't based in the Philippines. So
Mm-hmm.
Filipino OFWs working in like Japan,
Mm-hmm.
Italy, the UAE. So there's a lot of like approaches to be able to make it easy. So that's how I handled Marina. And the what I tell my patients, my transgender individuals talaga, is that the monitoring is one of the most important parts of transitioning. Not even your actual hormones, because that's how I keep it safe. That's how we make sure that the transitioning is done in a very safe way.
Marina talked about delaying her transition, or at
Yeah.
least publicly revealing that she was a woman. So, how common is that trans people delaying their transition? And does Hara Clinic sort of filter as well, like, their psychological capacity, like to handle all of the changes that are coming? Like, how do you prepare people when they transition?
Yeah, oh, definitely. Transitioning is a super personal process, and the stories that my patients come in with are so vast and varied. Majority of my patients, actually, they come in, they've already started DIY hormones,
Mhm.
meaning because in the landscape of the Philippines, where it's difficult to find gender affirming care, people were really forced to start doing this on their own without medical supervision, not
Mhm.
because they wanted to, but because before there really wasn't an option. So
Mhm.
I have a lot of patients who come here having already done hormones, whether estradiol for trans women or testosterone for trans men. So pag ganon, yung story ng mga patients na yun is like, sure na sila. They're super sure about what they want. They've already done it. So coming to me, it's really about transition, like shifting towards a safer, more monitored approach to their medications. To their, kasi minsan they overshoot or minsan they're underdosed. So it's just tweaking. My hormone naive patients, though, so these are the people who have wanted to transition for a very long time. There were a lot of different barriers that prevented them from coming in, either pwedeng financially or minsan they lived in a situation like with family or like external situations that made it difficult to transition, and then ngayon lang sila may personal freedom to do it. So I have to ask them like, how much do you want this? How sure are you? So we have ways to gauge it. We have like tools at our disposal to really understand. Psych clearances are not necessary. This is in the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. We call it the informed consent model. Putting a psych clearance there is a giant barrier, and mental health professionals, psychiatrists are very few in the Philippines already. So you have to create avenues to be able to make sure that your patients have easier access. So ganon siya, no? And it's really about having that initial conversation all the time with my transgender individuals. That first conversation is for me to get to know them and to get to understand what they want. And may talaga, I have some patients who come to the clinic and they're not sure. And if they're not sure, we don't start hormones yet, because we have to understand, we have to tell them that some of these things are irreversible. Some of, like, for example, for trans women, once you start getting boobs, uh, you need surgery to get those out. So you need to be 100% sure. For trans men naman, the voice changes. So if you're not sure, then maybe it's not the time to start. I do also have some patients naman who kind of want to figure it out on the way. They tell me things like, I don't know exactly what my endpoint it is, but I know that I need to start hormones now. So really it's about assessing the patient and then understanding what they need and meeting them where they are. And I think that's where being a gender affirming care doctor is both a science and an art, to really meet people where they are and understand what's the best way you can help them. So it's varied talaga. Like I have like thousands of different iterations of the transitioning story. But if you're very rigid kasi as a doctor, a lot of these people you'll miss them. You won't get to help them. So a lot of flexibility is needed. And
Do you have
yeah,
a limit? Do you have a limit
hindi
on the age that you treat? Because I know that in the US, for example, like the current controversy is giving puberty blockers to children. Even in the UK, I think that's the current issue that children are can't decide for themselves, so starting them on puberty blockers is very controversial. I don't know how the situation is in the Philippines, but for you as a doctor for Hara Clinic, do you have certain guidelines on those?
Yeah. So definitely kasi sa Philippines, because yun nga, there's really no foundation for this. So there's not exactly any rules that are there to break. There's no specific laws that say bawal or pwede. So I'm one of the few doctors in the Philippines who does open himself up to handling adolescents. My cutoff age is 15 years old. That's the youngest I'll entertain. Pero it's also arbitrary. It's not like you magically change once you hit 18 na parang you're more mature, you're
Yeah.
more you know yourself more. It's technically not like that. So these numbers are very arbitrary. But personally, I feel like 15 is the lowest that I'll do. Next naman, it doesn't mean that every single adolescent that goes into the clinic automatic will give hormones already. It's not like that. It is a very long, arduous discernment process that has to involve the parents. We can't give hormones without parental consent to anybody under 18. Another important thing is we do family counseling extensively at Hara, and I think we're one of the few institutions that do it. I tell my trans adolescents that you have to give your parents space to understand what you're going through because they've come from a very different generation. The terms that the Gen Z or the younger crowd are familiar foreign to like Gen X parents, no, or Gen X or older. So we do family counseling a lot, and it's very helpful because our patient is not just the trans individual, but entire family. I We kind of have to walk them in a process very similar to grief. I tell my parents, yeah, you gotta give your parents space and grace because it's like they're grieving this old version of you that it's going to disappear, and that's hard. It's difficult. They've had dreams and aspirations for this initial version of you, and those all have to change. So 15 is my cutoff, and yun nga, it's a process. Like every single adolescent patient that I have, I usually try to encourage them muna. Are you sure you can't wait until 18? Or what we try to do is we try to go through a social transitioning muna. We try to encourage them live your life muna as a male or female. Like you have to grow out your hair, you have to start dressing properly because the truth of the matter is it's not easy to be trans. Minority stress is a thing. You will go through like bullying, you will go through people staring at you. So there's a lot of these things that you have to be emotionally and mentally ready to just take on if you want to transition. So ganon siya. No? I really want to clarify that. You do not automatically give hormones or puberty blockers to every adolescent that asks for it. There's a process and you got to make sure that this is the best option for them. So kailan ba yung mga situations na best option talaga? So I've had like adolescent trans individuals who were already suicidal. Gender dysphoria was so severe that they did not want to go to school anymore. They did not want to leave their room anymore. It caused them so much distress. We've already also explored options in terms of adolescent psychiatry. All of those things we've explored already. So the gender affirming care actually is on the tail end of what we're considering. But if you look at the statistics, if you look at the experiences of trans individuals, they're usually sure, even adolescent. It doesn't have much to do with their brain. It doesn't have like yung formation of the brain nila. It doesn't have much to do with like peer pressure and ganon. It's a very, very personal thing. And there are very, very, very few cases where it doesn't follow the usual flow, the usual story of somebody really being born and living an experience that they were born in the wrong body and they just want the outside to reflect the inside. So, hira lang nangyari na people make a mistake that less than 1% of the transgender population actually detransition. And the detransitioning is usually caused by external factors. It's not personal. It's the outside environment forcing them to detransition.
So I assume that most of the patients that already, like the adolescent patients that go to you, that go to Hara, are sort of supported by their parents.
I think the only time parents will like go to the clinic with their child is if they support their child. So
Mm,
hindi namin nakakatch yung mga patients who hindi namin mga adolescents who aren't supported by
mm,
their parents.
mm,
The fact that the parents show up here already means that they're willing to work with their child. Have I had difficult experiences like mostly the dads that aren't
mm,
ready? Yes, may mga ganon. But yun nga, that's why they're here. I consider it as a win. The fact that they're here and
mm,
having a conversation
yeah.
means that at least trying to understand what their child is
Mm,
going. I remember there was this one a little bit heated
mm,
conversation with a dad, and the dad was saying that he doesn't subscribe to the woke ideology
mm,
and that he will call his son, so his child was a trans woman, he will call his
mm,
son by the birth name and use their pronouns. And
mm,
very adamant yung dad na ganon. So during the conversation, I asked the father, like, what do you feel your child is feeling right now, hearing you say all of that? And
mm,
then then he said he didn't know. Then I said, why don't we ask them? Why don't we ask her? And that was kind of like a
mm,
switch moment for the father when their child was able to express like everything you're saying has hurt me deeply. And then I asked the
mm,
father, is that, are you okay with that? Are you okay to stick so in your values to the point
mm,
that you are ostracizing or alienating your child? And parang ganun eh. So there are moments like that where they do need the help siguro. Kasi when it's a
mm,
parent and child talking, there's so much like emotional baggage stuff there that gets in the way, but that's what professionals are for. That's
mm,
in many ways I work as like a
yeah.
translator for them. So ganon, that's a rare experience. Most of the time nga parents are so supportive, and that's just very heartwarming.
Mm,
I think yung mas malapit to what you're explaining is I do have some patients who are considered adults. So past 18 pero early 20s, still living with their family, still financially dependent on their parents. So they do ask me, Doc, I want to transition, but I do want to do it stealthily. So they call it stealthing, where they
mm,
just microdose of hormones just to ease their dysphoria, but they don't tell their immediate family.
mm,
The changes come subtle, and then I have to warn them. I have to tell them like in a few months, hindi mo na yan matatago. Your parents or
mm,
your family are gonna start asking questions. So how are you gonna deal with that? So pag gano'n naman, we also have to make sure that they have the mental fortitude to like absorb all the incoming stress. And then I do also have to talk to them like, ano, what's your game plan? What's your safety net? Are you able to become financially independent? Are you already working? Ano
mm,
yung worst case scenario once they really confront you about it? Are you gonna get kicked out of the house? Are you gonna get disowned? Do you have a place to go to? Like, do you have a friend that you can live with? Do you have like a side hustle to follow? So ganon. So it's not really just the hormones. No, it's a very holistic approach to the patient. So siya, I think hopefully hindi ko na sinabi, but that's how I handle my patient.
Interesting. So you've talked about your experience, like how Hara Clinic deals with transgender individuals, like transgender people who want to transition. But how is the situation in the medical field in the Philippines? Like, are doctors open to
So here's ano,
healthcare?
yeah, I super get your question. Unfortunately, in the Philippines, there are no guidelines or standards of care in terms of dealing with transgender individuals. In fact, the word transgender is not even in our legal vocabulary in the country. So how do you make yun nga, how do you make guidelines? How do you make things like that if it's not even like a legal like reality in the country? So I think the best way I can illustrate this is to say how I even became a transgender health specialist in the first place. So it was around like late 2021 when I was running an LGBTQ clinic, and then I suddenly had these influx of transgender individuals coming into the clinic asking me, "Hey doc, can I please can you help me with my hormones?" And then I told them, "I'm so sorry. I don't know how to do this. This wasn't taught to me in med school. There are no standardized guidelines, even in the Philippine Endocrinology Society. So there's no way for me to learn how to do this in the Philippines on my own." I tried to refer them to endocrinologists because who I assumed would be the best person to help. But then a lot of these trans individuals told me, I'm sorry, doc, I don't want to go to a conventional or a traditional endocrinologist because I experienced a lot of dysphoria or a lot of misgendering and prejudice in that space, in medical spaces. Unfortunately, the healthcare spaces in the Philippines, especially yung pag mga government or ganon, it still has a lot of judgment and a lot of like it's not very conducive for the trans population. I even had like one trans individual who told me that she had gone to an endocrinologist, and the endocrinologist said like, "This is against my religion. I don't want to help you." So that is a reality of what we're facing. I have a lot of transgender men who can never go into an OBGYN office because the conservatism, like are the questions, a women's health clinic, and then they're very male presenting. It's very loaded. So there's very little trust with the transgender population to the healthcare community. Very little trust there. And I felt so bad about that. So that's how I got started. These individuals, itong first batch of transgender patients ko, I told them, "I promise I'll learn how to do this. Can you give me time? I promise I'll figure it out. And once marunong na ako, I'll come back to you." And they gave me that time. I immediately sought out how to train for this, and yung training ko nga came from WPATH. So that's the World Professional Association of Transgender Health. And I was lucky enough during that time that it was a hybrid program. So I was able to do portions of it online. And there's a very good community of transgender health doctors worldwide, and that's where we share knowledge. So when I came back and when I was ready, yun, I called them all up and I said, "Let's do this now." Only to realize na systemic pala talaga yung problem of transgender health here, because yun nga, we have the knowledge, pero suddenly I didn't have access to a lot of hormones. And then other services like voice training and mga ganon, we really had to build this kind of. So right now, thankfully, there's a lot more younger doctors who are becoming a lot more open to treating the community, which I am so grateful for.
Hmm.
The knowledge base talaga is kulang, because unless you specifically decide as a doctor that I want to be able to help the transgender community and personally seek out that knowledge, and that it's not built into our curriculums. So ganon siya. Um, but yeah, I think it's much better now, even in span of a few years. Much better now than it was when I started. There's a lot of collaboration with the HIV sphere, because that's the path of least resistance. That's what they were able to communicate it to me. The HIV sphere kasi, or the HIV advocacy, has a lot of funding, and then some of that funding can get diverted to transgender healthcare, which is great. Unfortunately, with yung recent pullout of USAID, a lot of funding did affect the advocacy. So, for example, there's a association of transgender health specialists in the country called PPATH, pero they were really heavily funded by USAID. So, when the budget pullout happened, a lot of the work did kind of slow down and have to take a pause. So ako personally, since I'm running a private institution, we were ano naman, lucky enough to be able to continue our services. Pero the NGOs really did take a hit.
Hmm. That's great. So, as a last question, it's interesting to hear about your experience and how you're advancing transgender, gender affirming healthcare in the Philippines. I wonder how you respond to criticisms when you're reinforcing stereotypes of what it means to be a man or a woman.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that?
Oh, man, I do have like some friends who have talked to me saying like, hey Dino, maybe you want to be too careful because this is such a hot topic. You will definitely have people who will disagree with you. And my point on it is that I'm not like running for like a government position or anything like that. I feel like I am still just like at the end of the day a doctor, and what the doctors do, they help and heal people. So I take it with every patient that I see in front of me every day. Every patient has an individual story, and as long as I'm able to help that person in front of me right now, win for me na yun. I have not experienced anything horrible. Like I have not experienced anything like people really like banging on my door or like picketing outside the office, thankfully. I think the Philippines kasi is not that violent in terms of interacting with the transgender community in the Filipino community, in the Filipino culture since time immemorial. I think the problem ngayon is it's not it's tolerated. So the main concerns is ano ba yung gusto kong like what did I want to say here? Uh Transgender health in the Philippines is not just a fringe issue eh. They've been around forever. What happens right now is that it's a public health issue, it's a mental health issue, it's a human rights and a primary care issue. And I think we're just entering into a time when we're acknowledging that they're problems and we want to be able to help these people. Pero yun, we just want to be able to help them. And I think Filipinos naman there are responsive to it. Nobody is hates you for or is very violent that you want to help the transgender community. It's just that ano yun eh, parang they want that distance. Parang as long as it's not affecting me and mine, it's not a big deal. Pero once it does affect them, that's when it's a little bit more tricky. But yeah, ngayon, I think the best way I can say is like every patient in front of me is is how I get through, is how
Mm.
I treat this. Just helping every single trans individual who comes to the clinic and asks for help. We just do our best to give that help to them.
So you mean that at the end of the day, it's the patient who dictates, like what you were saying earlier, a new endpoint niya. So it might not necessarily mean that they will take hormones, but
Yeah.
whatever their endpoint is, you guide them. That's what you're saying.
It's such an individual process. Yun nga, almost every iteration of the story I've probably heard. Like I have some trans men who are okay just getting their boobs taken out. They don't want to take hormones. Like I have one trans man who is a singer, so taking testosterone will change his voice. So no hormones, but breasts are gone, that's all they need, and that's perfectly fine. I have some trans individuals, man, like trans women who are limited by their work. Like they identify as a woman, but they like I have one who works in Singapore, so she can't really transition because it will affect like her job. So whenever she comes home, whenever she goes to the clinic, she goes full feminine because that's the only place that she's able to express herself as genuinely as she wants. So really, it's about the person, and it's about how we can best meet them where they are and give them what they need.
Thank you, Doc Dino, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Evan.